recording. It's not going to.
Hi, good morning all. How are we doing today?
Good, and you? Good morning.
Good morning, good morning. Great, great.
Hi, good morning all. How are we today?
I'm doing
Hello.
great. How you doing?
Good morning, I'm well. How are you?
Good morning. Awesome.
Morning.
Fine, thank you. I thought nobody was out there. I was like, wait, what's going on? Nobody out there? So how was your week going?
It was excellent, excellent. You know,
Okay.
it was a full week. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It went too fast though.
Okay, well, I pray you have many more excellent weeks. So very, very good. And Cameron, good. You say it's okay so far. So very, very good. Very good. We got to think about the people in Ukraine and what they're going through, and we got to be thankful that it's not us. We're feeling some of the effects, right, with the gas crisis, but by far we can't imagine, but you know, their experiences are. So we thank God that it's way on the other side of the world, and you know, just the inflation part, even though that's just as bad. I mean, or it's bad, but you know, thank God it's only inflation. So I am happy that some of you are having a good week. I hope that means that you had the opportunity to read and read the newspaper and you want to share. And then I think I asked 2 persons to please attend their, get their 5% this week so that we don't have, you know, the entire class. We have 14 persons on the last day of class in the review class trying to tell us that they need their 5%. Right, Owen? We saw that happen in intro, right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, so we trying to get this staggered approach to make sure that everybody gets it in and we're not just overwhelmed, you know, and we get the value of it by sharing each week. So hopefully the 2 ladies, are they here yet? Who said that they would make an effort? Were they able to?
So, Miss Bullard, this
Yes.
week was really, really rough for me. So I saw where he sent the stuff for the Toastmasters, but I could not. You know, I don't know if you know, I work for the Gentlemen's Club, and we in full swing now, and so that had my week really, really tied up.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine. But again, we're on the 3rd week now, so we don't want everybody to be, I don't remember, there were 2 persons that was supposed to go. Patricia, is there a Patricia here? Why have Patricia's name in my head? Okay, so hopefully they will say who was supposed to go and whether or not they got the opportunity.
That was
So
me. I was supposed to go.
who, Jasmine?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, but there was somebody else as well.
Yeah, it was somebody I can't remember well too. I think it was that. I don't know.
Tennille, it wasn't you, Tennille?
It wasn't, but I went to a Toastmaster, so I could speak after Jasmine.
Okay, great.
You
No,
cannot
Jasmine.
speak after me, Dania, because I can't speak. I didn't go.
Oh, sorry. Who was that prior to you? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Jasmine didn't go, so Tennille, you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. Owen sent a meeting in the group for healing communications. I went, and I was very happy that I went. It was on International Women's Day. They had an array of speakers, all women, all different stages in life, and they talk, most of them actually were entrepreneurs. So I found that to be very good. One worked in a male dominated field. She was in forensic. One was a teacher. First, she was a banker, turned teacher, turned chef during the hard times, and then she went back to banking. And she has a business administration degree and business management. And the third lady, she said she went all the way up to a master's in law, but she is in the banking field. And she was working there most of her life. And the fourth woman was an entrepreneur. I don't know if you all ever, at least it was the first time I heard of it, is pop or snap popsicles, the soursop ones and other like fruity ones. She created that business and she's creating more businesses. So it was kind of empowering because they were talking about their experience as women in the work field, how they got over some of the pushback they normally get and how people perceive you and how you move forward with that. But I know you always like the word of the day too, Miss Bullet. So their word of the day was comprehendus, which means like succinct, short and sweet. And I hope that this was a little comprehendus today for you all, but it was a really good meeting overall.
Okay, Tania, very good. And I'm very happy you found it beneficial. Would you join or attend other meetings?
I would attend other meetings because every time I've gone, it has always been a lively set of persons, lively discussions. It really is a good experience going.
Yeah, and a good group of persons to network, right?
Yes.
Network with, right? Like-minded persons, okay?
Mhm.
Who trying to move up in corporate Bahamas. And so again, like I said, these are the people that you want to help you build your career. These are the persons that you want to leverage on. Everybody needs a mentor, you know? And so we don't just want somebody to help us pull us up. We want to pull somebody up as well. Okay, and we don't want to be burdensome to those people. So find a way that you can give something back as well. Okay, but you know, network, get in the groups and the discussions and you know the initiatives that they put forward to help the communities and you know volunteering and I trust me when people know you and that's all it is today, you know. Like I always say, there are 17 persons in this class, and at the end of the class, all of us are going to be qualified. All of us are going to have our certificate. And if a position becomes available, who am I going to give it to? Right off the top, I would say if Jasmine, Joseph, and Owen Coakley sent their resume, I know them. I know Tennille. I know Devonia, you know? And so these, and I know Vanika. So these persons, they speak up regularly. They trying to put their names out there. If they call me and like persons from the class of call for references, you know, one person I said, but I don't even know you know, but persons who have gone all the way through to ICA, you know, and haven't kept me engaged or kept the class engaged, you know, they stand out. Okay, so what's gonna make you stand out? Right? I'm gonna say, you know, this ain't no favor thing. Owen is qualified, Renika is qualified, Tennille is qualified, Jasmine is qualified, you know, and they are familiar to me. People normally is just a human thing. They go with who they know, you know. I know Owen, he's given me homework to do, he keeps me engaged, he is information seeking. So let me give him a chance. And that's just how it works, okay? And any of you work in HR, you know, or hiring, you know that's how it works. So put your name out there. When the positions become available, the executive team should know your name. They should know who you are. They should say, oh yeah, I can vouch for Tennille. She doesn't need to bring a reference, okay? It makes a difference. Be qualified and be known, okay? Okay, so very, very good, Tania. Anybody else?
Good morning, Miss Bullet.
Good morning, Donna. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
That's good. What I wanted to say, right? I've never received an invite for any of these organization. How do I get a chance to attend or,
Okay,
be a
are you
part
in
of?
are you in the WhatsApp group?
I provided the number, but I've never received anything.
Okay, so Owen, who is the admin for the WhatsApp group?
I am. I probably overlook it. I will do that right now. I'll get on that right now. Just
Okay, you
give
need
me
Donna to
2
put her number in the chat?
Yeah,
I'm
or
not
she
in the
can.
group either. Can I put my number also?
Sure,
That'd
go
be
ahead.
good.
Just put your number in the
Morning.
chat and Owen will add you. And so you
Oh, and
will,
I
Oh,
sent you a private message in the chat as well. I wasn't added either, and I provided my number the first week. So if you can add me as well, I'd appreciate that.
okay, but what you do is, the WhatsApp group, Owen is normally very good. And see, Owen, everybody will know you because Owen will be the guy who always provides the invites. But what you are supposed to do is either go on Facebook, go on the internet, and just Google Toastmasters in your area, Rotary in your area, Kiwanis in your area, and it should pop up when their various meetings are. Okay, so Owen is being so kind to share with us each week, I think, or every time he's a part of, I think, a Rotary AON and Toastmasters, and so he's putting some information in the group. But feel free to go and into Facebook and just visit their page, and you will find out when they are having the various meetings. Okay. Okay, good. So what about the newspaper? Anybody getting their 5% today? There, the topic today is sanctions, and there was sanctions. There were so many sanctions articles in the paper. I could not read them all. So
Yes,
I
there
would
were a
hope
lot.
that you would have had the opportunity to read some information about the sanctions. Anybody had the opportunity to read the newspaper this week?
I was able to read several articles in the paper. There are actually quite a few interesting articles in the newspaper this week.
Okay,
And
please share.
I thought they were all timely as it relates to this course. In particular, the chapter this week, we're talking about sanctions. And I read about the article that spoke about the US urging the Bahamas to implement sanctions on Russia. And it was very helpful to me in understanding the logistics of sanctions as I was able to relate it to a real life scenario because, of this war that is currently happening in Ukraine. And I read other articles relating to that where the former Attorney General, John Delaney, and also the leader of the opposition is requesting that the government adheres to this proposal made by the US and wanting to know the Bahamas' position on this issue. The government has stated that they will just sit back and wait to hear from, I guess, United Nations Security Council to see if they would mandate that all members countries impose sanctions. And the thing is, while I understand the positions of Delaney and Pintard in wanting us to comply because of the Bahamas' relations with the US being one of our key allies, I mean, is there really an urgency to rush this? Because in my mind, and I have limited knowledge of the extent of Russian business in the Bahamas, I work in the insurance industry, but I'm thinking, what major impact can we have on Russia? Because I don't know that we have such a large Russian portfolio. And in addition to that, I would think that Russian access into our financial system would have already been limited because most of our correspondent banks reside in jurisdictions where those sanctions would have already been imposed, like the US and UK.
Correct. You are correct, Jade. I don't think the portfolio is more than 20% in the Bahamas. However, if we were to impose sanctions, it would really just affect the citizens of Russia rather than the government of Russia. Okay, so
Okay.
Everybody, just like Venezuela, most of the persons work, I think about 60% of their population work for the government, for the Kremlin. And so civil servants are they are labeled as PEPs in under Russian law. They should be labeled as PEPs. And so of course, you know, our definition of a PEP is different. It's at a senior level in the government. It wouldn't be the person working in the hospital or sweeping the floor or an accounts department, but under Russian law, everybody who works for the government is considered a PEP. Now, Venezuela and Cuba are heavily sanctioned by the US, and they have not, you know, the Bahamas has a big Venezuelan portfolio, right? And so a lot of times, persons are asking, well, how are we doing business with Venezuela, and how are we doing business with Cuba if both Canada and the United States have them heavily sanctioned? So they don't go that far, and that's why it's left up to us to decide. And normally, you know, we are such a small country, we just simply don't get involved. So I think the government is taking a good stance by waiting on the UN.
I think so as well.
So if the UN says to do it, then we are going to do it, but we are not going to do it just because the United States, and we're not going to get any backflack from the United States or Canada because we don't sanction them, you know, even though they suggest it. Now, morally, we should be in support of the war and saying that, you know, if we truly believe what Putin is doing is wrong, then we should automatically and not wait on the UN, right?
Comply, right.
Yeah, but I don't know if the government, you know, takes moral considerations into effect, you know, for a country. I don't know how it works, right? My biggest concern this week was that they let, and in fact, they didn't even let, the Russian tanker pulled up into Freeport. Now, around the world, of course, we saw that these Russian politicians and persons who are very close to Putin, they call them oligarchs. And so they seized a lot of their boats. And they seized their boats because these boats have, and these yachts, I should say, these yachts have bulletproof glass and heavy ammunition and war artillery on them, right? And so I said, okay, so I can understand why they were seized, because of course they have them strategically placed throughout the world, and you know, they setting up their defense. And so therefore that was a major concern. So I understand why.
So they did actually let the tanker in, because I didn't follow up with that, but I did hear.
Guess what? Guess what? The minister came on and said, we are going to ask, we are going to see what happens to see if they request to come in. However, if they go into Freeport, we have no say, because of course that's the port. And to me, the port is controlled. I mean, not to me, but the port is in control of that. And I had a major problem with that, because there should be nobody coming into our country.
I agree.
You know, that has that type of power over the government to decide when there's, I mean, you understand the risk, because if they are seizing yachts that have war artillery on it, of course this tanker has some on it. And why are they allowing them to strategically place that? You know, and we have tech right there in Andrews. I got majorly concerned about that. And I said, look how the government will pass the buck and say, it's the port. Now, I'm hoping that if the government wanted to deny that tanker from coming in, they had the authority to, I don't know what their authority would be with the port. What type of authority do you think? Could the port say, well, no, we're letting them in?
I guess, I don't know.
Right. So right there, I said that has to be fixed. That has to be. That was my.
That was the last thing I heard with the minister saying, where she was going to see if the government had gotten approval, or they had gotten approval from the government. But I didn't follow up with that. I haven't heard anything about it.
It parked right up in Freeport.
Oh wow.
It's there. Yeah, it's there.
Wow.
Yeah, and the minute that they said that it would be the port's decision, I say 100% watch that be in Freeport. So said, so done the next day. I said, they, you know,
But-
I saw it as corruption. I saw it as,
Did
you know,
they?
there's
I
no
thought-
loophole that should be
Mm.
like that in the system.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Ms. Bullet, I thought the court gave up sole their entry, port entry. Freedom of control. I thought government took back over control.
No, no, no. The Hawksbill Creek Agreement, I think when Perry Christie was prime minister, had expired. They had signed up for 99 years, and Perry Christie signed up for another 99 years.
Oh,
That gives them
Okay.
some rights to Freeport and all the concessions and blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I thought it was only not, I thought it was only Freeport land, but not like where you talk to say bring in ships and stuff. I thought the government took that back over.
Well, I guess not, because like she said, now if they go into Freeport, it's not the government decision,
No,
it's the
it's-
port, really, and the government has
Yes,
no
ma'am.
influence. That was
No.
scary.
But they
Yeah, that-
actually said that, Miss Bullard.
Yeah,
And-
they
and-
said,
and then-
she said,
Yeah, the port is in
she
control
made,
of Freeport.
yeah, she made some, she said, but it wouldn't be our decision if she said they could come into Nassau or Freeport. We're waiting on them to make their request for approval. However, if they choose Freeport, it wouldn't be the government's handing over their approval or something. You know, she made it very quirky, and I said, what?
Oh, wow, that's risky. That's really
Yeah,
risky because if
that's-
the port
there
is
you
in
go.
business with Russia, you know, that could have major
Ah.
ramifications for the entire country.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, so yeah, I said that's very risky. Yeah. But very, very good, Jade. Loads of information, like you said, lots of articles. And so again, we want to stay abreast and stay aware. And right now, there's so much things circulating on social media, on CNN, on Fox News. You always want to know who your source is, because you know, of course, the media in the United States is controlled. You can see the differences between Fox News and CNN, depending on if you follow the Republicans or the Democrats. And so you always want to know your source to find out, is this really, really true? Right? And so there's some suspect information going around about Ukraine and about Russia, because Putin is basically saying this war is an act of peace, and he is trying to save the people of Ukraine, and it's not him. It's you know, the Ukraine prime minister who was on the front line. Yeah, so you have to know your source and whether if the information is credible. Okay, very good. Crystal.
Good morning. So I just wanted to piggyback. I also read an article regarding sanctions, and Foreign Affairs Minister Fred Mitchell, he said, you know, sanctions from Western countries on Russian businesses and obligates are already applying to Bahamian business interests. So he doesn't understand what's the, so to say, weight with a formal decision to implement the sanctions. He said we're already conducting business with these people, we bank with them. So basically, he don't understand what the weight is. He don't understand why we can't just make a decision. The decision is really just whose side are we on?
He is the decision maker. Let's start there. First of all,
He said he doesn't really have anything to say.
how is it
That's
not?
what-
He's the minister of foreign affairs, and this is a foreign affair. How is it that he isn't only making the decision? He signs off on it.
Exactly.
Okay, he signs off on whatever the decision is. He has an input on whatever the decision is. So I don't know why Fred come on the TV talking in the third person. Okay.
I was just about to. That's the
I
same
was
article I was
wondering,
about to bring up.
and
That was
like,
the same article I was about to bring up.
I
Yeah,
said
because-
you're the Minister of Foreign Affairs, so why you don't have nothing to say? He talked about the tanker too. You don't have nothing to say about that. Like, why you
How?
don't have nothing to say about these things?
How? And it'll be the transport minister and the foreign affairs minister signing off on it. Come on. Come on. It's foolishness. Okay, so like I say, not only you have to watch the media outlet to see where their source coming from, then you have to say, is this person talking sense or nonsense. Okay, so again, we want the position, we don't want the responsibility, right? And I don't know, does anybody working offshore now? Of course, some of what he said is true. Already the Canadian banks will not do business with Russia because Russia is already considered high risk. However, there are some Swiss banks, and we have a lot of Swiss banks that do have a Russian portfolio. Now, I think I told this story before, back in 2018, 1 week I had paid salaries to Russia and Madagascar and to Kuwait. And the next week they simply told me that we no longer do business with countries that have a CPI index, which was the corruption perception index, less than 30. And I think at that time, Russia's CPI index had dropped to 18, then it went back up to 29. I haven't looked. We'd have to look at Transparency International to see exactly what their corruption perception index is right now. So I, had to explain that I can't pay your children's school fee. I can't pay your staff salaries this week because our correspondent bank has cut you off. Now, there were always a block through the United States. So now the European banks had cut them off. And so we had to go in search of a correspondent bank that would accept the SWIFT is sent to Russia. And that's another thing that happened this week that concerned me about the SWIFT payment system. But let's see if anybody else would have read that article before I talk about it. Justine, you want to share?
Good morning, Ms. Ballard. I wanted to share on an article I read yesterday in the Guardian, the World News, about Russia, even with the sanctions, that they build a fortress in their economy, that the sanctions won't affect them financially, like their economy won't crumble. Maybe over time, if the sanctions keeps piling up on them, but the way they build their economy, it is most likely that they are really feeling the pain of all the sanctions. So their currency is declining. Their ruble, I believe that's their currency. So it was like 80 ruble to a US dollar. So now it's like about 119. And then they have like their import goods that they import is going up from 10% to 50%. So persons are having to like remove items off of their, like restaurants, remove items off of their menu and, do it more native based because they're unable to import these goods. And it really is going to be hard for them. They're going to be poorer, but it's most likely that it won't affect them right away because of the way they build their economy. So they have the finances, and they're still exporting oil to other countries. It says that the US and the British have banned from importing oil from Russia, but Europe, they are more dependent on Russian energy, so they held back. So
yeah, well, Germany cut off
exporting their oil to.
Yeah, they were a major supplier of Germany, and Germany cut them off. So we'll see how long before, like you said, maybe it take a while before they feel it, but I don't know how long they can sustain, because remember now the world just came out of a pandemic and every country suffered during the pandemic. Can you totally take another blow right after? And this whole war is about them fighting Ukraine, because Ukraine has I think nitrogen or something like that, as well as oil, as well as the largest producer of corn. And they supply, they say 70% of the world with corn and the different additives that corn generates or what have you. And so therefore, this is what the fight is all about. So they could acquire this land, and so they could be the largest producer. So obviously there's a money strain, and for many years, Putin, you know, they had the gas staggered at $57 per gallon, and Putin could not make a profit off his oil unless it was at $65 a gallon. So the entire time Donald Trump was in power, they had the gas pegged at $57 just so Putin couldn't make a profit. And so then he experienced the pandemic. Now gas oil per gallon, it was $98 the other day. Now I think it's $119 per barrel. So all of this will, you know, affect them economically. And all of this is, the bottom line is about money. You know, they made a lot of money and they had a very strong sovereign wealth fund, but just like any other political group, I think he's been now would they call him the president or the Kremlin for 18 years? And in the 18 years, they done buy up all these luxury yachts, live up off the people's money, spend a lot of money out of the sovereign wealth fund. And so now he's trying to build that. So his economy is not as strong as he purports it to be. And these oligarchs that surround him are going to put a lot of pressure on him if he does not win this war in Ukraine and acquire that land so he can, you know, build the sovereign wealth fund. Because reports earlier was that it was drained because they lived this lavish life and the money is gone. So we'll have to see, but definitely he trying to build it back up, or they say, and if he doesn't, this could be his life. These killers he dealing with. You know, they say definitely if he does not, then he's going to be removed or assassinated.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, very, very good. Justine Owen, go ahead.
Yes, my article was on the Thursday paper, and I was very interested and amazed at the mid-year budget. And what I want to allude to, I think it was in the intro class when I talked about how the IMF accused the government of or being non-realistic to their objection what we call it, their revenue. They were saying that the government forecast was not realistic. And in the mid-year budget on Wednesday, the Prime Minister talked, they was talking about how revenue is already up by some 30 or 40%, even might get, dare to say, it's even more. And so I found that very interesting that, you know, we are able now to prove the IMF wrong.
I don't know if that's true, because I saw another article that says for the first time we had to put down collateral to Goldman Sachs to get funding. And there's some fund that they use to, I forget, the sinking fund or something like that. That is the purpose of it, is to put a collateral if you need to lend, if you need to borrow. And for many years, we were not able to, we borrowed without having to put up, I think they had to put up 2.5 million or 250 million. I'm not certain. But if you are purporting that, you know, revenue is up, you know, they all almost suggested that they took money out of one pocket and put it in the next, and made, you know, made it appear to be up when in actuality it isn't. You know, but I would have to read it in depth to actually follow it. But for the first time, we had to actually put collateral, and the opposition didn't feel like that was a good move on you know, behalf of the government's part. So Owen, like I said, find out who wrote this article, and find out this people depend, you know, they write based on their experience and based on what political party they support and whether they, you know, you in their network or not. So
okay,
find out who wrote that and if it's actually true. And is this a way of them just inflating it and saying that revenue up, or what did they do? Revenue may be up, but something else, so is borrowing. And now borrowing, we have to put down collateral. Okay, and just like they are purporting that the budget was not really realistic, it just looked pretty and it sounded good. Is the same thing happening again? Again, we don't have lobbyists. We don't have people fact checking. We have the opposition sometimes pulling out one or two things, but nothing consistently holding these people feet to the fire to make sure that they are really doing what is best for the country. Okay, so we want to make sure. But back to the sanctions. So what happened years ago with the financial services sector, of course, transfers all around the world go through SWIFT, and Russia and China try to create their own payment system. So in case something like this happened, because it is, they're saying that if Russia wins this war on Ukraine, then China is going to try and take over Taiwan, and Taiwan is the largest producer of semiconductors in the world. And apparently these semiconductors run the technological world. And so China is there in the balance, not saying anything. I think they had a vote at the UN and China did not vote. Everybody else voted that they should block Russia, but China just did not vote at all. And so China is watching to see if, Russia does indeed win this war so they can take over Taiwan. And again, it's when it all boils down, it boils down to money and control. And so what they tried to do is create a SWIFT payment system in case the world decided to block them out, and they not be able to, trade and send transfers around the world. However, like I said, the US had the Fed had them blocked out for years. They went through Europe. There are a few correspondent banks in Europe. And so I saw that they voted again in the UK. They decide or the European Union, we should say, which is about 13 countries in the UK or in Europe, voted to block them out of SWIFT. However, there are 300 banks in Russia that use SWIFT, and they only blocked out 7. So I don't know if they are the same. Like if we compare it to the Bahamas, like if you block out Royal, CIBC, and Scotiabank, then fine, you say you could do for the economy. But if you just block out the local banks, then if you just block out Commonwealth and you block out Bank of the Bahamas or maybe Fidelity, I don't know if that will have a major effect. Persons will just try and go and open accounts to Royal or Scotia or CIBC, or to the Union or something to that effect. So I don't know which 7 banks they blocked out, and if it really, really made a difference when they have 300 banks that you could go and send wires through, So yeah, that's how what the minister was saying in terms of Russia has already been blocked financially, but we still do have a Russian portfolio. But again, I don't think even though we had a Russian portfolio in our risk appetite, we didn't have a appetite for Russian PEPs. So if we would have found that it was one of the oligarchs who was trying to open up an account, we denied it. However, we would have to do proper due diligence to exactly, place them properly, because there was somebody who purported that they were like a loan shark business, or what's the name of the place? Greenleaf. They were like a Greenleaf where we just do loans. We don't open up savings accounts or anything like that. And so we want to open an account with you in the Bahamas. The purpose of this account is to give loans out in various countries, one which was Russia. However, when we did the due diligence, we found out that the owner of the company was an oligarch in Russia. And therefore, the account actually was already open. And this was one of those old grandfather accounts that, you could never reach the person. They wouldn't bring in the proper forms. They didn't bring in the registries. Like the account was deficient for years. And then finally we get this information and we find out who the owner of the account was. By that time, more than 6-7 million had already passed in and out that account. And then the bank, of course, made a decision to close out that account because of who the beneficial owner was. Okay, so that was another thing that he was saying, that because the beneficial owner registry is in place now, we should be able to easily identify, as well as there is a like I say, a PEP register, or we now in 2018, I mean, sorry, in 2022, by now, of the registry, the CESRA thing that you would have read about, Owen, tells you who are the beneficial owners of these accounts, who are Russian. There's a AML return as well that you do annually, and by country, you say what percentage of your business is from Switzerland, what is from Bahamas, what is from Russia. So the central bank, the Securities Commission, they should know what percentage and what amount of money we are holding in this financial sector in regards to Russia. So does anybody here work in offshore where you have a Russian portfolio or Russian book, or no? Okay, nobody here in the Swiss banks. Okay, so because I would just want to know, what are the effects? And I imagine it's the same as Cuba, it's the same as Venezuela. These accounts are considered high risk, and compliance normally signs off on it. And if the correspondent bank is taking the wire, then you process it. Now, since these 7 banks, these could be the 7 major correspondent banks that would have blocked them out. And so the wires may have stopped. However, that only affects the citizens, because I don't know if we have any oligarchs on our books. And if we do, I am certain it's not, it's probably 1 or 2 of them, because again, everybody around the world with CRS was fighting for their tax dollar, and you are part of the government that fighting for this tax dollar, but you have an account offshore that you didn't disclose. I mean, it did happen. We had a lot of ambassadors and consul generals, whatever, that had money all around the world that was not disclosing to their countries. So it could be possible, but could you imagine in a communist country reporting that Owen is from Russia and he works for the government and he has money in the Bahamas and he wasn't paying taxes to the Kremlin? That might be Owen's life, right? So, the rules are different in many countries, right? We understand that, right? So it could be not just that they tax you and take most of your money, they may take your life. Okay, so let's get into the book. Very, very good discussion, and good that you are aware, and hopefully by the end of this chapter, we'll understand what sanctions are and how they work. And then we want to talk about NPOs as well. Anybody read the chapter and have any questions, or just we want to jump right into it? Go ahead, Owen.
I want to know, is sanctions and apartheid related, or are they similar? For example, the apartheid that we had against South Africa back in I think that was in the 80s or 70s. Are they related?
You said sanctions and
apartheid. Yeah. Are they related? I mean, are they similar in any way?
I would have to. I don't want to give you the wrong information, so I will look that up and tell you. But I don't think so. I would look that up.
Just doing a quick Google, it says apartheid is a policy or system of segregation or discrimination on the grounds of race. So I don't know that it would be the same thing. I'm thinking that they would be different. That's apartheid and sanctions would be different because apartheid is focused on race. Sanctions is
Right.
focused on,
Oh, okay, thanks.
yeah.
Right, it says the policy that governs relations between South Africa's white minority and non-white minority for much of the latter half of the 20th century. It says sanctioning racial segregation and political and economic discrimination against non-whites. So the word sanction, we probably need to Google that. It's world sanctions. There are different types of sanctions, and people use it in different categories. So it says a threatened penalty for disobeying a law or rule, official permission or approval for an action, impose a sanction or a penalty on. Okay, so there are types of sanctions, and there they said there are 5 main categories: counterterrorism, conflict resolution, protection of civilians, non-proliferation, and democratization. Okay, but when we talk about putting a sanction on you to change a behavior, I mean, it's similar, but with apartheid, again, it's like she said, specifically for race, it's against the law. To think that, I guess, because you're white, you're better, or you don't have as much rights. And so they are giving you a penalty if you do not follow this law. They're giving you a sanction if you do not follow this law. And in that regard, they mean penalty, right, for disobeying that law. However, I guess it's the same thing, but like that's specifically for race. Okay, Owen, is that good?
Yes, it is. Yes, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, and so let's just look before we go into the book. Let's just look at the sanctions in the Bahamas. So this may be very old. I'm not certain if this is, again, the Minister of Foreign Affairs who said he has no say. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so in terms of sanctions, so we basically, they're different types. They refer to them as international obligations, okay? And so on the exam, sometimes it may not specifically say sanction, it may say international obligation. And so you want to ensure that you know how it's referred to, because one person said, "Oh, Miss Bullet, I didn't know that was a sanction question. I didn't know what international obligation was." So now you know, okay? And so this is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website in the Bahamas. And it shows you exactly which countries we have sanctions on. So we know that Cuba and Venezuela are heavily sanctioned by United States and Canada. But do we see Cuba or Venezuela on this list? So hence we don't have them sanctioned. It just means that we cannot send any of our transfers through. If we have a correspondent bank out of Canada, we have a correspondent bank out of the US, they ask you what percentage of your business is Venezuelan. And normally if you have more than 30 or 40%, then they don't offer you correspondent banking service. You normally go in somewhere into Europe, into Switzerland or into the UK to send these transfers, okay? Because the US does not accept it. So this is our list, and it tells you there are different types. We have a sanction on Somalia, an arms embargo, on Rwanda, on Afghanistan, on Iraq and Kuwait, on Liberia. And let's just look at their different types. On Liberia, there's a travel ban and there's an arms embargo, and there's an asset freeze. So let's just see if I can click on this so we can see how it looks. And this, just looking at this paper tells you how old it is, right? So we wanna just let's look at the one on Libya. I think it's better. Probably it'll be clearer. Did they move? Look at this one on Lebanon, because like I said, we did have a client from Lebanon. It says, since no individuals have yet to be designated by the committee, these sanctions cannot be imposed. And so therefore, this allowed us to open accounts from persons for Lebanon. Okay, but there was one that was easy. Okay, Libya. So there's a no-fly zone, there's an arms embargo, there's a travel ban, and there's an asset freeze. Okay, and so we want to click on it. And so if there wasn't an asset freeze, then that means we would have been able to open accounts for persons from Libya. However, this is how it looks, and it just simply says, subject to paragraph 6, no person in the Bahamas and no Bahamian outside the Bahamas shall directly or indirectly sell or supply, transfer to Libya by way of Bahamian registered vessel or aircraft, arms and related material, technical assistance, financial assistance. So this right here is telling you, you can't open an account. Okay, and then it goes on to say a ban on Libyan flights. No aircraft registered in Libya or owned or operated by Libyan nationals or companies shall be permitted to take off from land or overfly the Bahamas unless the flight has been approved in advance by the committee or in the case of an emergency landing. Okay, so what does this mean for the persons, the regular citizens of Libya who just want to come on a trip to the Bahamas? Can they come?
No, they can vacation.
Okay, what do Americans go to Cuba?
Yeah, a lot of them.
Okay, so what they do? What they
They
do?
come to the Bahamas and then
They
go to the
go
Bahamas
through,
inside
right?
the
It's not
Caribbean.
Connecting flight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just more expensive. And so you have to, if a Bahamian wants to go to Libya, they will catch a flight to a say Malaysia or somewhere and then go on to Libya. The risk is if something happens in Libya, there's no ambassador or consulate general, and they may say that, you know, there's a sanction against Libya on Bahamian should not, you could possibly get fined, right? For doing that. But a lot of Americans, they fly to Nassau, and on the domestic side of the airport, they go on a flight to Cuba, and so that they are not ridiculed or, I guess, fined or anything, because there's a ban for Americans. They have a card that they place into your passport, and so they stamp that card, and you just discard it. And so when you travel again, you know, there's no record of you ever going to Cuba or to Venezuela or what have you. And so that's, you know, there's always a workaround the system. So again, this was just to show you exactly, I don't know when this was updated or, you know, if anything changed. Normally these sanctions, you know, they didn't change. These been in effect from, like you could see at Somalia, from 1992. Now, when Donald Trump came into play and became president of the United States, of course, he started, you know, he had an affinity for Putin, and then he had started speaking to Kim Jong-un. And so, of course, when in 2018, when the FATF looked at our deficient recommendations, of course, the sanctions one was deficient, and so we had to update it and put a framework in place. And so from that framework, what happens is that depending on who your regulator is, they send out notices asking you to block certain, either it could be a client, or it could be a company, or they can say, make sure that no person is on your books. And so I just want to show you, if you are registered by the Securities Commission, annually, the central bank for the banks, they will send out, you must attest that nobody listed on the sanction list is on your books. And so you attest to them in writing that I've checked our books, no clients or no companies fall under this name and or under these countries on our books. And you send that annually to the central bank. Quarterly, you send it to the Securities Commission. And outside of that, they still send you, like this just came out on March the 8th, and it goes to all registrants and licensees. Again, international obligations, economic and ancillary measures, all of this are related to sanctions. This one is against ISIL, and it just tells you that there's been an update, and please send in, there's a form A or B, and this site takes you into the United Nations list, and it tells you that these are the entities and groups, and you could see this funny name right here, but Ms. Bullet can't pronounce. That's who we should ensure that's not on our books. So if you work on the retail side, it's fine, but if you work on the offshore side, you really have to check, because we do have some customers with names just like this, okay? And so there are a lot of persons, who is on that list. So if you are new to an organization, when you get there, you must see the last attestation that would confirm that we checked the entire list. But as new ones come in, you go in and to make sure that this name is not on your books. Once you ensure that that name is not on your books, then you go back to the Securities Commission and you send out, you confirm to them that you checked and the name is not, or the new name is not on your list. And this is what they say. There's a form 1A or 1B that there are no findings or no hits to that name. And if you do not send this in, let's see, please advise that failure to submit the required report may result in disciplinary action, including a minimum fine of $200 per day per order. Okay, so they normally give you a deadline to submit this. And so there you go. No, I was saying the annual declaration. Okay, they must confirm compliance within 30 days. So this came out on March the 8th. By April the 8th, you would have sent your forms into the Securities Commission, or you pay $200 a day. And so on April 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, if the weekend in there, you're getting $200 a day for this one. And so far, I've received 5 of these for the month. So could you imagine if I said, oh, I just caught up, I don't have time, I could get $200 per day for each one. So you want to ensure that you pay attention to these and you send them in quarterly. And normally when they come out with new names or new updates, you ensure that you are not getting any disciplinary action or $200 per day per request that they send to you. Okay, so this is how we updated our laws to ensure that we are checking the sanctions, and this is the sanctions framework that we put in place to ensure that recommendation that was deficient on sanctions, I think it was 24 or so, that we are compliant. Is that clear on how the framework works? So when customers on board into the company, we go into the UN or the UK's, sorry, the US sanctions list, and we put their name in and we do a sanctions check. Some of us have a sanctions function in our World Check. World Check is a system where you put person's name into the World Check and it does a background check and it spits out a report to say Ms. Bullitt is either PEP or she was charged with money laundering before. It gives you like a background look into who the person is. And normally each institution that opens accounts, they world check, and then they go to the US sanctions list and they put that name in, and they have that sanctions report printed out, and that's at our onboarding. After onboarding, like I said, the Securities Commission, if you're regulated by them, the Compliance Commission, the central bank will send out, listen, the sanctions list has been updated, a new name has been added to it. Please confirm that this is not on your books. And we see the fines that are charged if we do not send that information into them. Is that clear so far? On how the framework works in the Bahamas? That's clear? Any
Yes, ma'am.
questions?
Yes,
My
ma'am.
que-
Yes, ma'am.
Just one thing is, my question was about how do we check, and you answered that with the world check. So the framework, but I still have an issue with the framework is, the basic framework is, all right.
Okay, so world check, some persons do have the world check function that checks for sanctions, some don't. And so I think it's OFAC. Let me just check it. Okay. There's a OFAC. Okay, here it is. Let me just share the screen. So when you walk into the bank, and I don't know, I'm not certain if you're anybody, most of y'all are on the retail side. Are y'all doing this on the retail side as well? Anybody works in account opening? Nobody wait till a bank? Y'all come talk back with me. Who works in the bank?
We do world check, yes. Every time you
Okay.
open an account.
Yes.
Y'all don't check the sanctions list?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so when you open an account, this is what you do. You go into World Check, and World Check is a paid system. And so if there are no hits, or even if there are hits, you go in, and this is the Office of Foreign Asset Control out of the US, and it shows you lists, and we go right here and we say Owen Coakley. Let's see if Owen, I hope you won't have no hits, right? And so your search has not returned any results. We will print this and we will put this on Owen's file and say, this is his sanction check completed. Okay, that's how it works. And once there are no hits, then we put it on his file. Let's just say if we put Ben, I don't know how to spell the name, Laden. Let's see it. Oh, I spell it right. You see, it's important, and it's important to spell it right. And I think there's a hyphen.
I think it's Bin. I think it's Bin Laden.
BIN is BIN.
Yeah.
Bin? Okay.
Yeah, Bin Laden.
LADIN?
EN, I think.
Let's see. If you don't spell it right, Owen could have all kinds of sanctions against him. Okay, there you go. And see, all these hits come up. And so what you do is you click on each one, and it'll take you to a different search and say his gender, and there's a report that is generated. Okay, it gives a date of birth, place of birth, citizenship, and what have you. And so this would be considered a sanctions hit. Okay, and so of course, compliance will then decide, are we going to do business with this person or not? Now, some persons do show up in the offshore world on the sanctions list. Let's just say this was Owen, and Owen can say, well, years ago, I was affiliated with a company where the company was charged with money laundering, but not me in particular. And so let me get a letter from my lawyer to put on my file so I can explain exactly why my name will appear on a sanction list. Okay? And if you work in wires in SWIFT, a system, the SWIFT system that's attached to WorldCheck also gives you hits. And so remember that there are 8 major banks that all the SWIFT go through. That's the Deutsche Bank, the Wells Fargo, the Chase Bank. They are considered the Wolfsburg Group, and they control the correspondent banking world. And so they, of course, we know how much breaches that Wells Fargo had, right? And so all those banks are on these lists. And so when you send in wires, you just have to make sure that that person was not one of the persons that was involved in the scandal. Okay, he might have been an innocent client who was just used. So you have to do a little bit of an investigation to find out, was this person involved in the case or was this person the victim? Okay, and that's what you do as a compliance officer. Okay, and so that's how it works internally. Okay, OFAC check, word check, and then we will either open this account or not. Okay. Any questions? Is that clear?
So far.
Yeah? Okay, okay. Just so you know what will be done at work. Okay. So the book goes on, chapter 3 talks about terrorism, first of all, because many, like I said, there are the 5 categories, and of course, any exam questions would be centered around the 5 categories and why these sanctions are put on each of these countries. So again, the 5 categories: counterterrorism, okay, and an example of the counterterrorism sanction was put on Libya that we just read, and it was the destruction of a Pan Am flight, where I think Libyan officials blew up, and it was a very popular case back in the day. And so around the world, they had asked member countries to put a sanction on Libya. Okay, so if you wanted an example of counterterrorism, we want to counter terrorism, and therefore we inflict this sanction on you, right? And so there is the Libya destruction of the Pan Am flight, and then resolution 883. So I think the Libya destruction was resolution 748. And in your spare time, you could actually go on and Google resolution 748, destruction of Pan Am flight, or resolution 883. So you can see exactly what happened and what the sanction is. But that particular sanction was for counterterrorism. And so we would have covered terrorism extensively in intro. And so by now we should know what terrorism is and what are their objectives. They need military devices, they need weapons, they need safe havens, right? And so therefore, in order to counter this, you know, the UN said around the world, we expect when things like this happen, whenever there's a group of persons that are killed all at once, we consider it terrorism. And that Pan Am flight, I think, had 130 persons on it that died. And so collectively, we come together and we sanction Libya to ensure that there's no repeat offense. Okay, so countries should ensure that the intent and knowledge require to provide the offense of terrorist financing may be inferred from objective factual circumstances. Criminal liability and sanctions, and where there is no possible civil or administrative liability, and sanctions should apply to all natural persons. So you would see on the Venezuelan sanctions, they are not only there, you know, the big oil and gas company in Venezuela is PDVSA. And so you would see that there's a list of the president, Woodrow, his wife, his entire family. And so they have all of them listed as persons on a sanction list, as well as the entire company and it's on the individuals as well as the company. And again, in Venezuela, that is major because 90% of the persons they work for the oil company, whether they dig the wells or they supply the gas stations or they you know, work in that industry. And most of the business licenses are joint ventures with the government, where the government owns 60% and the person owns 40%. And so therefore, most of that Venezuelan book is so high risk because they are considered PEPs, because anytime there's a joint venture with the government, where the government owns more, then you will consider the PEP. Okay, so all of that makes you very high risk. And of course, we found out that most of the terrorism, they're, like I said, they try to achieve their objectives. And one way of them achieving their objectives is through charities. And of course, we saw that in 2019, there was a big uproar in regards to charities because the law was updated, and the law now states that you must be registered as a charity. And it was found that there were more than 300 plus charities in the Bahamas where they were registered and were not registered or not properly. There were 300 plus charities that were not properly registered. So what happened was that the government updated the law, and so financial institutions in the Bahamas put in the newspaper, listen, you have to go to the Registrar General, register your charity. We need to know, you have to take account of who is giving you a donation, how much the donation is, and we want to ensure that you are not accepting money from any terrorists, because terrorists are known to use charities to channel their money through. And so therefore, in 2020, it was a pandemic, and I always use Bishop Lawrence Bull as an example. He has this feeding ministry. His feeding ministry was not registered. And so we were getting international pressure. And so every Wednesday he was out there feeding the people. And here is the bank calling him and telling him, the little bit of money you have on account, if you don't come in and regularize your account, we are going to have to close it out, or we are going to have to freeze it. Not only that, you are going to be charged $10,000 a day every time you feed, every Wednesday when you feed those people, if you do not come and regularize your account. So could you imagine Bishop Lawrence Rule not knowing what KYC is, not knowing what due diligence is, not understanding what the law is? All he knows is he wants to feed the people. There's a pandemic and persons need help, right? And so therefore, it was difficult at the time in 2020 trying to explain to him exactly what was needed. But think about it. If a terrorist did pull up to Bishop Lawrence, and I think we talked about this before, and said, let me give you $1 million. You feed the people with 500,000 and you send me the 500,000. Do you think he would have complied? You all answer that for me, please.
Sure would. He would comply.
I think he would.
Okay, hold on 1 second for me. You'll discuss it. 1 second, I'll be right back. 1 second.
Can someone please refresh the question for me, please? I didn't understand it too good.
I missed it as well.
The
My
question
internet
was,
He
is
said-
Bishop Lawrence Rule, somebody showed up to him with $1 million and said, take 500,000 and feed the people, and take the next 500,000 and send it to me. Would he know what terrorist financing is?
No, he don't know, but my thing is that with him, he free and clear because he don't know. I mean, ignorance is no excuse, right? But still, I mean, he don't know. I mean, he have a charitable organization. I mean, he is legal, licensed, and registered in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
He is now, but during 2020, before the law changed, was he legal? Was he registered? No, he wasn't.
No, he
No, he
wasn't.
wasn't.
Lawyers.
No.
But man,
And
the
he
court
just
and the FIU should understand that.
I can understand. They just happy, just
I
happy
don't
for the
think they, I
donation.
don't think they look at
They
it
can help out.
that way. I think they look at it as, okay, this man just getting all these funds and doing all these things. Where this money coming from? Like, what if this money was coming from some type, like you guys said, terrorist act or something illegal, or drug money or what have you? How would they know, or what laws or what compliance would be done to, deal with that? But then
Right.
it's still going to a good cause, but it's still,
So-
where the good cause coming from.
Right. And,
So-
and like I said, we learned in intro that persons, they use charities over and over. They do make a donation. However, they half of the money need to come to them to finance terrorism. And so we wonder how bin Laden was alive for 10 years, living comfortably. They didn't use the banking system. Remember, they were blocked out completely.
Underground.
Right. And so this is the workaround. And this is why we change from having thresholds or fill out a declaration if you're over 5,000, then we increased it to 10,000, and then we increased it to 15,000. So persons bought in $4.99, $9.99, and then $14.99. So this is why we said create a profile and verify that this person is fully makes 2,000 a month. So we expect that 2,000. Because if you create a threshold, they just stay below it. So not only we believe that he survived through person's salaries and sympathizers and these charities. Okay, so like I said, here you have a person who may not be financially sound. He's doing a good deed. He does not understand the risk. He's a great candidate for us to send some terrorist money to, because he wouldn't even know what happened. All he knows is a blessing come from the Lord.
That's it.
So you think he would comply? Because I mean, the red flag would be, why do I have to send half of your own money back?
Really?
So what about in the case with
You could see that
churches?
man ain't worrying about that. You could see he just want the blessing. Like he said, the Lord send him the blessing. He ain't worrying too much.
He want to feed the people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all he want to do.
Simple as that. And so there was major outcry from, again, the people who did not understand. My God, this man helping the people every week, the people, hungry people line up, and the government threatening to charge him $10,000 a day. Imagine how the whole Bahamas would have been out there to say, vote the government out. But would have had a choice. Where if he did come on the TV and say the bank blocked my account, I can't even get the little $500 to feed the people, there would have been major outcry, right? So luckily, he's a priest, and I can't remember his name, Paul Rowell, he's a lawyer, stepped in and said, Bishop, I will, create a foundation account for you, and I will help you to regularize your account so it's not blocked, and so that, and I will teach you how to keep account for all the donations that are coming in. And so your ministry isn't shut down. Okay, and so that's what happened. And I think Paul Rowell educated him a bit on what he really needed to do before it got out of control. So thank God that was done. And like I said, it's very important because it could have happened, and we know that he would not even, like you said, he would have just been happy for that blessing. He was combined his business with the rest, because he really wouldn't have known. Okay, and so
what about in the case of churches? I mean, nobody is looking to see what's going in the collection pan. Suppose you're a drug dealer and you bring a conker $100,000 wrapped nicely in an elastic band. You just throw it in the collection plan. I mean,
But you ain't asked to return it though. You ain't.
Church can't put that in the bank. They can't deposit that in no bank account. $100,000 you bring 1 week, that's a red flag.
Right, unless you've been doing that every week. Yeah. So you would have to question as to where it came from and how, the bank.
Who says they put it all at once in the bank?
But can't they just deposit it over time?
They can, but again, remember these policies are not written in stone. They are for the majority of the time, and we are trying to work together to combat money laundering, right? And so therefore, we want to, all of us who accept money and deposits and have account, you have to have a profile. You have to stay within your profile. If you go outside your profile, then you have to answer questions. Okay, but we cannot just blatantly, like how Leslie Miller went into BPL and deposit $100,000 and nobody said anything. Okay, internationally we are being watched, and we it'll appear as if we're not in the fight with the rest of the world to protect the financial services sector against money laundering. Okay, so essentially we want to take steps to ensure that we protect our sector, and that's all. It won't happen 100% of the time, but when it does happen, if a church, they walk in and with this $100,000 and say from the Lord, no, you have to look at the background on their account. You have to look at the transactions. You got to see if it's in their profile, and then you start the investigation. When you start to say that we have to close this church account, I bet you they will start to say, we will keep proper records. Okay, and all of this is in the law. I think it's the NPO law of 219. Okay, and again, we had to enforce it because Head Knowles was in a big controversy with GoFundMe. If I don't know if y'all remember that story.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
So go ahead. Okay. So go ahead. Somebody wanted to ask a question?
Miss Bullet, I have a question. Okay, like in the instance, like what we was talking about just now with the church thing, right? If somebody was to come and to like and say, just put a stack of $100 bills there, a visitor per se, right? So you don't know who the person is, you don't know where it came from or whatever. In a situation like that, I guess they would have to layer the money, I'd say, because you won't be able, like you say, everything now has KYC attached to it. You have to know your customer. They already have a profile for the bank and whatever. But in an instance like that, so what would they do? They'd have to, could they come into the bank and explain that's how they got the money and they want to deposit it? Or is it something where they have to take their time and deposit it piece by piece?
No, listen, the bank only wants an explanation as to what did you do. So this was a substantial amount of money. When you found this out, if you ain't do nothing wrong, there's no reason for you to lie. You see what I mean? And so therefore, you could say, we have the visitor card. We could ask you to fill out the visitor card. They don't necessarily have to fill it out, but they ask, what are the controls you have in place to protect your institution from being used to money launder? We have the visitor card. We keep a record. You don't just collect money. You know who your members are. My church just keep a record of your tithes. Bishop always preaching and saying he could say who pay and who he ain't pay, right? And so because he said that, I started not putting my name on the envelope no more. Because to me, I didn't agree with being tracked of when I pay my tithes from when I say
I agree with that.
God, not between me and you, but so they should, again, the church already have a profile. Now, if this church is only deposit $1,000 the most per month, when you come in with 10,000, that's a question. Okay, and that's a question that some questions you need to start having with the church. Listen, you have to inquire when you all see this type of money to make sure that, because the bank is going to have questions. You have to ask your visitors to fill out the visitor card and try to determine who this money came from. And definitely this money don't need to go any further. Is there anybody asking you to send it to a third party? Stuff like that. Did they ask you for change? Stuff like that. But again,
it's totally innocent. What if there was no visitor's card filled out? What if this was just a random visitor walking into the church? How are they able to track who deposited this money?
That's what I'm saying.
They can't. That's what I'm saying. Like I said,
the bank still, what does the bank do? And like you say, let's say $100,000. Like let's say I win the lottery and I just decide I can walk into a random church and deposit that. I never go back to the church.
If the bank has concerns, all the bank has to do is take the money, put it on hold, write to the FIU, fill out a suspicious transaction form, and just say that we asked them to declare the source of funds. They were unable to. However, let the police go and do their job and investigate. And they could come back and say, oh, I know Pastor so-and-so, we did our investigation. We don't feel that it's terrorism or anything, money just being laundered to the church. So let the police do their due diligence. It's not up to us.
But can they confiscate it if they do?
It's the police, not us,
Mm.
not the bank now. The police will investigate and the FIU will come and tell you, we have investigated and you can release the money. But they will watch the church for a while or see, you know what I mean? And that's the whole point of suspicious transactions. It's suspicious, they can't give account. So we need to see if this could happen again. We need to see over the course of the year how many times, you know, this type of thing, somebody will just walk up in the church, don't give an account and drop this load of money in, and you only try to meet them, no time, ask their name. You just accepting this money every single time. Then you acting as a washing facility for this person. This person ain't getting nothing in return. You know, so there are ways to find out, and then if the police say they don't have an issue, then you don't have an issue. Right? So let's not automatically, and I think that's what happens as compliance officers or even as professionals in the financial institution, we automatically think that the person is wrong. And my story is Brent Simonet deposit of one year he was running for government. He declared 50 million. 5 years later, he declared 150 million. And so what did we say? Oh, he had to teach this money. Oh, look at how he dig up all them roads. He owned Bahama Hot Mix. He owned half of the Bahamas. Look how he make 100 million in 5 years. So everybody questioned that. How did he do it? And of course, I know they blocked his accounts because he's or perhaps they did not because of who he was. But somebody would have had to have a conversation. Where did this $100 million come from in 5 years? What did he do? He came into the bank. He said, my mother passed away and she left me $100 million. He brought the will, he brought the checks, and he proved how the $100 million came from her estate. Everybody was still mad. But what we should do is try to figure out how we can leave our kids $100 million. Correct?
Exactly.
All right. Okay, so not everybody's a criminal. And if they are, it's our job to just fill out the form, pass it on to our compliance officer, let her do him do the initial investigation. And then if warranted, send it on to the police. It in your business. If the police say that's their church and they grow up in that church and you're not doing well, in your business. You just keep all your information on file and you move on. Okay, you call them in and say, but we need to increase the profile. You know, again, just a watchful eye, because over the years, there's a lot of foolishness that happened where the churches only deposit $300 a week and then start bringing 10,000 and withdrawing it. Now, when that church go to withdraw it, you will say, so are you washing this money, or what you do with the money? Should prove to us that you paid utilities, okay, or pay the parking lot or something for the church, then we fine. If not, then we have a problem. Okay, and so that's the non-profits. The book goes on to talk about President George Bush. And of course, if some of us was born back when he was president in 2001, he always talked about these weapons of mass destruction. And so prior to the update of it used to be the Dodd-Frank Act in the United States. They changed it to the US Patriot Act. And it used to just be anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism or terrorism financing. But after he updated this Dodd-Frank law and it turned to the Patriot Act, then they added PF on the end. So it's AML, CTF or CFT interchangeably, and PF. And that PF stands for proliferation financing. These weapons of mass destruction that he always talked about. Okay, and so again, he signed into law the Patriot Act. It's used by the US to fight foreign official corruption, police the operations of multinational financial institutions, and limit the activities of offshore banking centers. And this was his way of trying to fight tax evasion back then. But of course, the Patriot Act did not work. Obama had to create FACTA. And of course, that was way more, that's working. Just in the US now, they're getting their tax dollars. And so, of course, with terrorism, he realized that, you know, just like the offshore banking world, if the US block you out, just go to Europe. We sanctioned Cuba, Russia, and Europe could help Cuba. We sanctioned Venezuela, the EU could help them, or China, you know. And so he created, updated the Patriot Act to try and combat, you know, put some laws in place so that we could prosecute these terrorists. So of course, after 10 years of 2009-11, we found bin Laden living right outside the Defense Force base in Afghanistan, right? So he felt that, Obama felt that, of course, the Afghan leader was protecting him. And so perhaps they was, perhaps they wasn't, we don't know. But it was very suspicious that right outside the base, and every time they had a lead over the years to you know, catch bin Laden, they always included the Afghan leader, and he always got away. This particular time, they said, somebody have to be pimping bin Laden off, right? Let's not tell the Afghan leader. Let's just go in and seize him now that we have this tip of where he is. And lo and behold, that's where he was, and they caught him. And of course, the Afghan leader spoke out, how dare you come into my country and do this or that or whatever. And Obama sort of said, I was to tell you, I just, you know, I called you, you don't answer the phone. And we get him, and I called you to tell you we get it. Okay? So what the US has done is, we wonder, they have sanctioned Cuba and Venezuela and now Russia, but we have not. But what they do is, once you offer correspondent banking services, they have created this SWIFT system to go through the Fed. And once that money goes through the Fed, it's on US territory. And so all banks have US correspondent banks, but like I said, because so many countries are sanctioned, then we just go to Europe. And it costs more when you go to Europe. And so of course, you know, each financial institution looks at the bottom line. And so we preferably use the US first, but because so many are sanctioned, how they created their SWIFT system, you know, we going through the back door, or we going a workaround, which is a more expensive route. And so the US dollar is accepted around the world in 195 countries. So not only did they set up their SWIFT payment system to go to the Fed, so that the money always ends up on US territory. They also, their money is extraterritorial, which means that if you accept US dollar, some parts of the Patriot Act could be applicable to your country. Because of course they felt that if they didn't kill bin Laden, they say, okay, now we catch bin Laden, you'll put bin Laden in your Afghan prison. What would have happened? Bin Laden would have been sitting up in the air-conditioned prison with his wives having steaks and lobsters, right? Just like they feel like our Nighty Nose or our the white major need to be extradited to be in prison and for the right amount of years, right? And so therefore, this is why they want to say they have some, so US law or another country's law is normally does not hold precedence in another country. However, they set it up. If you accept the US dollar, part of this Patriot Act is applicable to you. So US banks must take steps to identify the beneficial owners of foreign persons. And I don't know if you all remember years ago, before we could just send a wire, and then they stopped and they say, no, you must have the address and telephone number, I think, of the person, or the wire can't go through. So US banks must identify foreign persons whose funds move through payable or corresponding bank accounts held with them. So you must know who you're sending the money to and where it's coming from. And the extraterritorial criminal jurisdiction of the US is extended over any person outside the jurisdiction who engages in any act which it has been committed in the US would constitute an offense. So even if you in the Bahamas and you send this wire and something similar happened at Julius Baer recently, I think the principals, the CEO and four the major what do you call it, sales officers, they had a large Venezuelan book at Julius Baer, and they got caught up in some scandal, so they left and they went to take over Gonei Bank. And so the US moved in and said, listen, we want to investigate them for some frauds that they had committed, and they was going to extradite one of the guys. However, he decided to take a flight, and when he reached in customs, they locked him up. He had a trial, and now he's serving 10 years. And you could go online and read about that. But even though that happened in a Bahamian bank and through a Venezuelan book, because they used the US SWIFT system, they were able to prosecute him in the US. And they just grabbed him while he was there. But if he did not travel, they would have, he would have been prosecuted in our courts and then perhaps extradited to the US. Okay? And so that's the extraterritorial, and like I said, the way they set up their SWIFT system, so all the money could go to the Fed, so this law would be applicable. And so if you want a corresponding banking service, one of the questions, it used to be a 28 question sheet that you just check the box. Now it's a 200 question survey that you fill out, and they ask you, are you compliant with the US Patriot Act? And there's somebody, who always says, well, we're a Bahamian bank. We don't have to be compliant. If you offer a correspondent US banking service, yes, you do. Okay, Tennille, go ahead.
I'm trying to see if I could understand it a little bit better. Would this be something like how, I guess, Adrian Fox was caught up in a smuggling ring scheme, and because he was sending, I guess, he was committing the criminal act of sending the Chinese persons to America, smuggling them. That's why he had to have a trial in New York versus having it in the Bahamas, because it involved, I guess, money moving from America to here too.
No, they caught him in the US waters, I think. Because
they did it.
There was 2 persons with him, and the other person spent 10 years in the US jail. And he only got a $5,000 fine. Yeah, they caught the US Coast Guard, caught him.
Oh, so that wasn't an accident. He was literally caught red-handed in
He
their
was literally caught in their waters, right? And he was put out on bail and asked if he could come back home. And that's why the US government had sent a message to our government saying he was supposed to appear in court and he is considered as fugitive. They had sent that about a year or so ago, that he is considered a fugitive because he was supposed to, return to court. But of course, I guess it depends on who you are. Only poor people go to jail, like I say. And we now see that all the charges were dropped against Kendrick Dorsett this week as well. Yeah. So no politician going to jail for none of these things. So who going to jail, right? Well, us. Somebody got to go to jail. Go ahead, Gwen.
So I was wondering, in talking about sanctions, I saw a story this week where John Roll was asking the local Bahamian banks to make sure that they had, I guess, things in place to comply with the sanctions. But I didn't really understand why he was, I guess, beckoning him to do so. Because in my mind, don't they have correspondent bank? Doesn't that automatically ensure that they are compliant with the sanctioned, I guess, rules?
Yes, yes, but again, nobody wants to say we didn't do anything. So when I read that article, I was like, what is he saying? Come on, you were the governor of the central bank. What are you saying? Of course, we have strong anti-money laundering framework. You know exactly how many Russians customers we have because we send all these reports into the central bank, and you know that each bank is compliant with KYC. So how, and you know that the sanctions framework is in full effect. So what are you saying, sir? Again, like I say, you have to really read between the lines when these people say something. Are they passing the buck? Why are they talking in the third person? You are the governor of the central bank. You are supposed to be saying, I can assuredly say that my banks in the Bahamas have their AML framework in place, their sanctions framework, it's being monitored, it's effective, blah, blah, blah. Right? So that's his little warning out to the industry of what he in charge of.
Okay, I understand. So that's
You
just him
see?
saying he do something. Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So that's what I got. Ms. Bullock, very critical. Y'all can be better than me, please, Gwen. Always think the best. Always think the best. Yeah, be better than Miss Bullock. So, yeah, okay. So we understand the extraterritorial arm of the U.S. dollar. 195 countries around the world accept US dollar. And so because you accept that US dollar on par in some cases with your currency, they have this extra territorial jurisdictional arm that they can prosecute your people, right? But of course we know we have some people, if they're in the right clique, they could do foolishness, they could get bail, they could run home, and then the Bahamas got to extradite them, okay? So in the section 3.319 of the Patriot Act, and Patriot Act is very long and very extensive. It allows the U.S. court to seize funds in an account if those funds are held for a non-U.S. bank. And again, like I say, normally other countries can inflict their policy on us. However, if you accept U.S. cash, and if that transaction goes to the Fed, and of course, we need the US so they can seize. This means if a foreign bank has an interbank account in the US, which is covered financial institutions, the funds shall have been deposited into the interbank account in the US, and any restraining order, seizure warrant, or arrest warrant regarding the funds may be served on the covered financial institution and the funds in the interbank account. So what's going to happen? All of my customers, I have 800 customers, and of course I send their wires to the US daily, whatever amount of money, and most of those accounts you have the balance with $1 million a night. So all the money that you would have wired in the day plus $1 million, just with the treasury person is being doing all day. And so I say, send me Gwen information, or I block your account in the US. If I block your account in the US, your other 800 customers suffer. Your bank will close down. So what we do, we hand right over all this information. What else you want to know but Gwen? Here it is. You say close our account, we close it. You say do this, we can do that, right? And we send that information to the FIU, and I guess the FIU will liaise with us, okay? They said the seized funds need not to be related to suspected criminal funds deposited in the foreign bank overseas. So that could be Tennille money, Devonian money, Quintet money, all of that he gets seized. Okay, until you give us the information that we want or need on that particular person, because we ain't gonna allow you to protect them. Okay, and so all these different things, like I say, this would cause a country to, get a sanction, because we don't want to hand over this piece of Bahamian bank, and you can't inflict, well, not the Bahamas, so we know big bad country, right? But let's just say you're trying to get this information out of Russia, and Russia saying, oh no, we protecting Gwen. We ain't sending this information, right? And so therefore, they send out these warnings, and they talk to the government, and then either the government complies, or you feel the full extent of, I mean, a full-fledged war. But of course, they fighting over major things, not small people, but it has happened over, like in Venezuela. Donald Trump decided that he was going to put in a new president, and he sent the guy there and said, this is who your new president is going to be. Let the people vote. And Russia, the other G7 countries or G8 countries had to vote and confirm. Are you allowed to do this? Are you allowed to just send in a president to another country and tell the people this who you suggest they vote for? And of course, they voted against it, because in their heads, if we allow the big bad US to send a president into Venezuela, when they want to take over China, they could do this, and any other country. Okay, and so then the book goes on to talk about the PF again, that's added on the financing of weapons and proliferation. Okay, and again, it says proliferation has many forms, but it involves the transfer and export of technology, goods, software, service, or expertise that were used in nuclear, chemical, or biological weapon-related program, including a delivery system. Okay, and so you have to understand that we have OTEC here in the Bahamas, and so therefore, I know in terms of nuclear weapons and atomic bombs, and there was an article that I read many years ago where and I don't think it's very true, but I think it's close. So where the US says we have 2,000 nuclear or weapons or biological, chemical weapons of mass destruction, and then China said we have 8, and Kim Jong-un said we have 1, and other parts of the world say they have 1. So really and truly, it's the US with most of this weapons, but these policies are afflicted on the rest of the world. We could have it, but make sure y'all don't have it, right? Because we in charge. And so persons engaged in weapons proliferation use dual-use goods, including software, technology, documents, diagrams, and other goods that can be used for civil or military purpose. These can include components of a weapon or that should be used to manufacture a weapon. So again, like I said, we have OTEC and all of these stuff in Andros. And so when they walk into the bank, we was able to open an account for OTEC, right? Because that's the US, of course, nothing wrong with them. But the guy from OTEC had a cousin that was in the Israeli army. And then they called us and they said, well, we would also like to open an account. We're from Israel, we're from the Israeli army. And now we say that's outside of our appetite. Okay, so why were we able to do business with the US grant and not with Israel?
So sorry, I wasn't focused. Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Yeah, why are we able to open the account for the US Army but not the Israeli Army?
Or the US Army does no wrong. Anything can happen for the US.
Yeah.
But everybody else, we have to scrutinize. I forget the saying you said. You always say about
all fairness. Of us are equal. All of us are equal,
yes.
But some of us are more equal than
more
others.
Equal. Correct. That's it right there.
If you read Animal Farm in high school, yeah. So again, I just want you to understand like how the world works and how the system works. And many of these politicians in the US and in Europe, they don't want to full-fledged put sanctions on Russia, or they don't want the outlying islands or countries to inflict these sanctions because they're business partners. Donald Trump had borrowed $550 million from Putin. There's a Trump Tower in Russia. Okay, so you think if he was president, Trump Tower was gonna suffer? He was gonna manipulate the sanctions just to make sure that he didn't suffer whilst, all of this was going on. Okay, so they wasn't buddies. Okay, and so when these sanctions are issued, and I saying it for a fourth time, the use of sanctions can be grouped into 5 main categories. And like I said, this is a very easy question on the exam to answer. The framework of sanctions, as well as how they are grouped. Counterterrorism, the destruction of the Pan Am flights in Libya, protection of civilians, Resolution 1265 of Rwanda, non-proliferation of weapons, there's a global treaty from 1970. Democratization, there's a 1940 resolution. Okay, very easy to answer and very easy to give examples. Okay, there are not only those categories.
Valerie, can you repeat those examples again? Sorry, Mike, I didn't get all of them. I got counterterrorism, conflict resolution is, what was the example you gave? Sorry.
Iran Resolution 2231.
Okay.
Protection of civilians. Rwanda Resolution 1265.
Okay. And non-proliferation.
Global Treaty of 1970, but of course there should be some new ones out, so you can just Google non-proliferation sanctions.
Okay.
And democratization.
So the homework question for chapter 3, where it asks about how sanctioned countries received assistance during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, so again, you can.
Yeah, I wasn't able to find a whole lot of information on it. The only information I found so far was where it talked about the US issuing licenses to allow for more, I guess, COVID-19 related transactions, such as the delivery of products like face masks and ventilators and vaccines.
Medical stuff, that's all I found too.
Okay, so what happened during, and very good that you asked that question. What happened, because that's a past question during the pandemic that was on the exam. So what happened during the pandemic was that they updated that law of the UN because there was a shortage of PPE equipment and ventilators. And the Bahamas in particular had ordered, other countries had ordered, and they were coming through the US. And Donald Trump stopped the shipment and said he suspected it of drug trafficking. And so he stopped it. But when he really stopped it, it's because their supply was late and he wanted to make sure if they didn't receive their supply, the US. So he almost like he commandeered the ship, but then blamed it on drug trafficking because he didn't want, the world to be outraged that you trying to save your country and let other countries, smaller countries suffer. Okay, so also doing that, these again, Venezuela and Cuba heavily sanctioned. So Venezuelan President Maduro came on TV and he was outraged. And so he was saying his people is suffering, people is dying. He don't have the vaccine and they don't have PPE equipment. And so China stepped in and helped Venezuela. China also helped Cuba. Cuba then sent 100 doctors to Italy, and they sent 100 doctors or 50 doctors to Dominica. And so Bahamas Air Flight took those 50 doctors or how many ever doctors they sent to Dominica. And then Iran was crying out to the UN for money as well. 100 countries need to borrow money from the World Bank, to make it through the pandemic. But the US had Iran blocked. So the UK loaned 500,000 euros to Iran so they would be able to get PPE and any other vaccines that they needed. Okay, so Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran. And even though Cuba was sanctioned, they sent their doctors to Italy and Dominica. And Bahamas, they have flight volunteered to take doctors from Cuba to Dominica, so they would have help.
So the information before we found, she and I both found, that's it, that's all the information where they was able to send extra medical supplies and stuff like that.
Yeah, but if you go and Google now, the US gives Iran 500,000 euros, you would see that story. If you go and Google, the doctors from Cuba went to Italy and to Dominica, you would see that. And then Venezuelan president speaking out against, and let me know what you find. If you don't find it, then I have some videos I'll send to you. Okay, but I want you to get into the habit of doing research.
Yeah, that's how we got it. I got it like that during research. I'm Googling and reading up on different sites and whatever.
Yeah,
But
so
I mean, we're talking about this Iran and Jamaica, but I'm saying directly to the Bahamas, the only thing that we did get was medical supplies and, like you say, ventilators and stuff.
where he stopped the medical supplies, yeah. But we are not a sanctioned country, so you don't necessarily put Bahamas in there. It asks, how did sanctioned countries get aid, right?
Right.
Right, so
Okay.
Iran is
Right, right.
sanctioned, Iran is sanctioned, Cuba is sanctioned,
Right.
Venezuela is
Dominica.
sanctioned, yeah,
Venezuela, yeah.
yeah.
Right. So there are no other components to that in terms of assistance.
Again, you could go online and Google, they are the 3 examples that I have.
Okay.
Yeah. You can look at our sanctions list. What did Libya do? What did Rwanda do? Remember our sanctions list? But it's easier to find, you know, with the countries that the US, so you can look at the US sanction list and see which countries they have sanctioned. Okay, and then you'll find worldwide news. The Trinidad and Tobago news, normally, if you want information out of Venezuela or Cuba, Castro used to write the newspaper. The name of it was the Gama. I don't know if a lot of information is online, but if you want to find out information about Venezuela, you read the Trinidad and Tobago news. Okay, so they're not the 5 categories, and y'all got all the examples? Yeah. There are also targeted sanctions. So you know, whilst we had this Russian portfolio, it wasn't only you know, the whole Russia wasn't sanctioned. However, like we couldn't, you could pay school fees in Russia, but you couldn't order timber. You couldn't, you know, there was a sanction on a targeted, a specific good or service to not be imported. So that would fall under the targeted sanctions. There could be embargoes on exporting or supplying arms or related material. A travel ban, Miss Bullet cannot travel to Libya. Everybody else in the Bahamas good, but not Miss Bullet. It could be a ban on exporting equipment. It could be a ban on the import of a raw material or good. And again, that's not necessarily because something wrong happened. Imagine there should be a ban on importing fish and conch, right? But I don't know if anybody tried to do it on a large scale. And it wouldn't make no sense because it would be expensive, but just so you would have an idea, okay? Or financial sanctions on a government or associated companies or individuals. So they are specific targeted sanctions, okay? And the purpose of these sanctions or these embargoes are to encourage a change in behavior of a target country or regime. Of course, we see that we want to discourage the behavior of Putin right now, and it doesn't seem to be working. We want to apply pressure on a target country or regime, and as an enforcement tool when international peace and security has been threatened. And if you are considered a NATO country, an attack on a NATO country means an attack on all countries, all NATO countries. So everybody should come together and support an initiative. Okay, if you attack one, you attack all. So back in the day, like I said, Ukraine had a very one of the oligarchs who was Putin's right-hand man was in charge of Ukraine. And so I don't know if, any of us were born back then, but the United Soviet Union group was established back in the 80s. I think, I don't know if Mikhail Gorbachev, I can't remember who was I don't know if it was Mikhail. The United Soviet Union was established where Ukraine was a part of it. Kazakhstan, Tabashi, or all those were part of the Soviet Union. However, they couldn't afford, it's just like the Bahamian Islands. And as we know, Eleuthera is a Bahamian island, but in Spanish Wells, they have their own electricity. And when it was the pandemic, they couldn't really tell Spanish Wells what to do. Spanish Wells had some independence. And then the port had their own independence. You could have locked down Grand Bahama, but certain parts of Freeport, it was depending on what the port says, just like how this Russian tanker could be sitting up at the port, even if in hyphens, the Bahamian government don't agree, right? And so, therefore, the USSR, they decided we don't want to take care of all these countries. We can't afford to make them independent. And so they made Ukraine independent. But of course, we making you independent, but hey, you make the largest supply of corn around the world and some nitrogen or something like that. And you have oil, we can make you independent, but we might need you later on down the line. So what they did is he put one of his oligarchs in charge. And so after Russia had established itself and the sovereign wealth fund and what have you, and it was doing okay, it was fine. Ukraine could do what they want to do. They don't have a problem. But then before even the pandemic, Putin lived this big lavish lifestyle, spent up all the money. The sovereign wealth fund was empty. And then his barrel of oil per gallon was too high for him to make a profit, and the world had it staggered. Then he started to look to his friend in Ukraine and say, hey, sign Ukraine back over to us, even though we make y'all independent, because we can need that money that y'all making now. So of course, this was his friend. They signed it over, and the country, when they had their elections, they voted him out. So whilst he was in power and after he had made this decision, of course, the world had blocked Ukraine. Ukraine was on the United States block list. You couldn't open an account with any Ukrainians. It's very hard to get money in and out of the country. And so they really, dealt with China and the rest of the world outside of the US. So after the elections came and the Ukrainian people saw how we have so much natural resources, but again, because of the bad decision deal that this president made with Putin, we voted him out. So they voted him out, and now they have a good president in place who build up the economy, who tear up the agreement between him and Putin and say, no, we are independent country now. You cannot take us back over. This is why this war is happening. And Putin is saying that the PLP or the FNM signed the agreement. You don't have the right to tell us we can't have this part of Ukraine, the part where the cruise ships come in and y'all make the patch attacks and all the import and export going on. We taking the best part of Ukraine, and so this is why this war is happening. And we need the oil reserves too, and we need the money from the corn and from the whatever nitrogen, and so that's what is really happening. And so around the world, we are feeling the effects of these various sanctions being put in place. And the more sanctions put in place, it is going to cost more. Of course, Germany would have gotten oil and gas from Russia because it was cheaper, but now we have to work around, and it affects the world. So what the book goes on, we see we want to is conflict resolution with most of these Russian sanctions. And again, you could like I say, go online and Google them and find out more about it. Like I say, for a very long time, Ukraine, until they voted out the president who signed over the country to Putin, after they became independent, Ukraine, he was a designated person. There was a list, and Ukraine was completely blocked, and they started to block Putin as well. And so they put frameworks in place. And so, of course, only after 2018, when we updated our framework, we updated our laws, we paid attention to the framework. And so I showed you, you go to OFAC, you world check when you open up an account. But another very popular question will ask, what is the framework? What should you include? What do you put in place? And so in order to have a secure sanctions framework to protect your institution, you should have documented policies and procedures, including a risk assessment. You have defining rules and responsibility. Who really going to OFAC to check? Whose responsibility is it if there's a hit? What are the steps that we take if we get a hit? Do we contact the FIU? Do we write up a suspicious transaction? So there has to be a plan in place, and it has to be somebody who is responsible. Normally it's compliance. You want to train persons, you want to communicate, you want to raise awareness, you want to explain what's happening in the world right now and how should we handle Russia. You want to monitor and screen systems. And so a lot of times we have tracking systems. The compliance department has a tracking system in place. Now it depends on how savvy it is. These systems are very expensive. And 100% of the time, not 100, let me say 98% of the time, you get a false positive. So we put Jasmine Joseph's name inside the system. She's a new account. We just opened, we screen check her. She passed all, no red flags. We opened the account. However, that assessment of Jasmine is just as good as today. Jasmine and Miss Bullock could go in the pandemic. We got to feed our children, Jasmine. So we go in money launder, right? And so now we are criminals. Okay, Ms. Bullock just teach the ICA class. Now she's being arrested for money laundering. So this is why you want to create awareness. This is why you want persons to train. We don't want Owen to think you could world check today and that's it. But of course, if you have 800 clients, you can't, you have to have this system in the background, checking the names and every night and checking the transactions. Right. And so if you're a small institution and you know that 98% of the time you have a false positive, it's that 2% of the time that you spend $1 million for. And a lot of institutions do not like to make that investment. So they don't have a good system all the time. And a lot of times we have to do things manually, but we don't even know what to check for or what we should be doing manually. So you need to go back to your institutions. And I'm going to say this a couple of times. Go back to your institutions, find out what systems you have. Jasmine is law-abiding today. She commits a crime tomorrow. How do we know? What are the systems in place? Is the system savvy enough to spit out a report and say, Jasmine got charged with money laundering or free and reason in the newspaper every day, or we don't have the cost list or the court list? How do we know, right? And so we will check Jasmine low risk. So for 3 years, we're going to do a review on our file. If she low risk, that means it takes us 3 years to find out Jasmine money laundered. No. So we need to see if there are reports that tell us Jasmine committed this crime tonight, and an escalation process for decision making. Already, we opened that account for the U.S. Army. That's his cousin who in the Israeli Army. And so he called in, cousin, I call down to Gwen, and you introduced me to Gwen, and your account is open. Is it discrimination? So there's no discrimination. Gwen could simply say our policy that was written from 1990 states that Israel is outside of our risk appetite. And so there's no discriminating. Okay, but you have to have that escalation process and that policy in place already. Okay, and this is why compliance never speaks to clients, and compliance, we have to move away from saying, compliance, turn your account down. We waiting for compliance to make a decision. Compliance have your why or no. No, you have to get terminology correct. The compliance is everybody's business. The organization needs some more time to make a decision on whether we send this file, whether we open this account. Stop saying compliance. Compliance does not have to give any explanation. Compliance acts independent of the business. Okay. And I had an incident where, you know, we had some customers who wanted to do a private placement in the securities market, and we use a platform called Vontobel. Vontobel has their own compliance department, and so my salesperson bypassed me because he said I was busy, and he went directly and put this private placement in place, and it was rejected. And so the customer was on the phone arguing, what is happening? Where's the money? What's going on? And he said, well, Ms. Bullard, I don't know why they blocked it. I said, but you didn't even tell me you were putting this through. I would have world checked it, sanction checked it first, and find out what was wrong. So I said, but anyway, compliance normally talks to compliance. I called Vontobel on the phone. I said, is there some issue? You know, the client is very irate. They said, well, if you go and do your due diligence, you will see exactly why we blocked this transaction. And this was in 2017. And so I went into World Check, I put the names in, and lo and behold, it was a Russian oligarch. And they said, we don't have to give you an explanation. I'm just going to say outside of our appetite. I said, okay, thank you. And that salesperson stood over me. Oh, what did they say? This needs to go through today. I said, they didn't give an explanation. But they didn't, again, you don't want anything that's going to bring litigation or give reasoning. And so I said, they didn't give an explanation. They're not going to do the transaction. You have to, your client has to go somewhere else. And that was in 2017. So like the minister said, there has been, you know, already we ain't doing business with the CPI index, and we see a Russian oligarch. No, we ain't doing it. Okay. So reporting requirements and reviewing the sanctions related process. There should be sanctions list and screening, and assurance investigation that it's done properly, thorough and continuous interrogation of results, assurances that the escalation process are in line with the business as usual practice, is in line with the appetites, and that we only accept persons that we have controls in place for. Quality assurances conducted on investigations undertaken by new joiners. So new staff, you know, we want to verify it. We want somebody to ensure, because persons for some reason think that this is a very complex, I mean, the decision is complex, but in terms of the process with sanctions, it is not very complex. Okay, so what are the categories? What are targeted sanctions? What happened during COVID? How do you design a compliance framework? Very easy questions, easy to get 10%. Explain and give some examples. And you have the examples, you could just go online and, you know, read up on Pan Am Flight or whatever one you want to talk about. Is very, very easy. Okay. Any questions? Now, Ian, none of y'all didn't talk back to me good today. Y'all didn't read this chapter. What's going on?
You did.
I communicated in the chat.
You communicate in the chat, eh? Okay, but do we have a clearer view? Do we understand?
Yes.
Okay,
I
so
got
give me some
better
feedback, OG.
clarification.
OG, give me some feedback then. What did you learn today? What is clearer now to you?
Well, in reading the chapter, I was able to, and just what's happening right now with Russia is kind of bringing it together. Then I understand sanctions a whole lot better. The targeted sanctions, like you said, applies to measures such as embargoes on exporting the supplies. And so that's what Donald Trump did during the COVID-19 pandemic. He really put targeted sanctions without saying it, really.
Correct.
When he had all of the equipment. And so whatever was being shipped throughout within the US, he was taking. And so people had to find workaround. And so you had countries like Cuba that started to help other countries that were sanctioned to try and assist them during the pandemic because they were crying out for help. And there were, like the UN was saying, at this time, let's take, we need humanitarian exemptions to sanctions. So you could keep a lot of the other things, but at least the human side, let's try and assist these countries that need help to save the people. Let's have some compassion. And then there were other organizations like the Red Cross as well, that was standing with the UN and saying, you know, yes, they're sanctioned countries, but let's just look at what we can do to save their lives, to save lives in those countries. And so I think if we didn't have all of the information that's happening now, we may not have been able to really understand sanctions as much, but the connection now with the SWIFT and with putting things in place to block persons in different ways is all coming together simply because, unfortunately, the war between Ukraine and Russia, but it's helping us in our class to understand this chapter better.
Okay, okay, good, very good. Owen, you wanted to add something?
No, I just was saying when I looked at the 5 categories, I got a clear understanding of the sanctions and so forth.
Okay, okay. And like I said, very easy question to answer on the exam. The tax one as well, very easy question to get full points. Okay, but persons seem to be afraid of them, but like to me, they're the easiest ones. Okay. Jasmine, what about you?
But like I say, you know, I just catching up with y'all. Everybody used to these terms and terminologies and whatever. So basically I read, I listen to the class, and then I go ahead afterwards and Google and try to get a better understanding.
Okay, but so far it's clear and you don't have questions.
Yeah. So far it's clear. I understand all the different sanctions and why they do it. And like OG said earlier, now we can understand a little bit because it is happening currently. We can understand a little bit more why these things, why these systems are in place to protect our country from different things.
Okay, good. And Donna, what Putin do today? My Grammy used to watch the war in the Gulf back in the 80s. She used to say, I wonder what Saddam doing today. So what Putin do today, Donna?
What he's doing today?
Yeah, what Putin saying today? It's still an act of peace?
No, it's a third world war. It's not an act of peace. That's what he's saying. But according to the president of the United States, it's a third world war thing.
And Donald Trump said he's a genius.
Oh, Putin is a genius?
That's what he said?
Wow. He might be. He might be a genius. I mean, in his own way. But he's not a genius with what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's clear and you on track.
I understand the sanctions stuff, what you're saying, you know. I may not say nothing because I'm listening. I'm married. I may not say anything because I'm listening. And then I go over and I process the stuff. Forgive me, I have 2 little bad girls right now, just came in the room.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, so I just want to make sure everybody is on track and everybody is engaged and, you know, none of y'all sleep because Miss Bullet couldn't sleep today, so y'all can't sleep either. All right?
No, I didn't sleep at all.
Okay, good. So we are moving into risk, and risk is 1, 2, 3, 4, the next 4 chapters. And so each week we will talk about a different aspect, but again, it starts off very cloudy and then it gets clearer the more you talk about it and the more examples that you get. Okay, so if you need to spend some more time digesting, and the book goes on to tell you, like I said, if you have a SWIFT system, you'll see all these major fines from all these banks around the world because again, that's who will fine the customer as well as the bank. The bank is not be charged for negligence or because they didn't do proper due diligence or they didn't get proper KYC information or what have you. Because once these laws and rules are in place, we have scammers and hackers and we have people that sit down all day long and they try to circumvent the system. And so that's why these banks were fined, because they were just negligent while persons are circumventing the system. And so that's why I'm saying, go back into your organizations. What controls do you have in place? Do you have to do anything manually? Do you know that you have to do something manually? Okay, so just pull out a file and look at it, see if that OFAC printout is there. If it's not, look for your World Check and see if there's a section for sanctions, because in World Check, there's a section that's an extra thing that you have to pay for. And most companies only have the basics. Now, World Check can scan the name every night. Where I use the example, me and Jasmine, law abiding today, we go and create do criminal activity tonight. Will your system spit out a report after we are arrested and tell you that Ms. Bullet and Jasmine committed this crime? It's charged in money laundering. So you could pull the file and you could alert the FIU that we have some accounts for Ms. Bullet and Jasmine. And then what do you do with all these politicians? And this is why a lot of companies just put in their risk appetite. We don't have an appetite for PAPs. Because look at Shane Gibson. I mean, this wasn't his first, second, or third rodeo. But now he's suing the government because defamation of character. What do you do if he was on your books? What do you do at work if Russia, what have you been doing this whole weekend this month? You can't turn your focus solely on Russia. You can't turn your focus solely on one customer, but there has to be awareness. And you have to have controls and a process in place. If we get a hit, if we find out Shane Gibson is here, now he is innocent, what do you do? And then again, you have to find out who sits on your board. Compliance reports to the board. So if you have 10 PLPs on the board, what do you think the board will say? Should we block Shane Gibson and close out his account?
Never. They free him right away.
Okay then. Okay, and then on the F&M side, CMD, when the newest negative media came out about Lantishka, should be a blocked or Lantishka rule. So again, these are the type of things that happens in the real life. And so this is why this escalation process needs to be in place, because you will find that Ms. Bullock will say, oh no, that's Sheena Gibson, don't worry, but that's Lantishka, don't worry, that's fine. But is it truly fine? Because if it was negative media, we had negative media on a customer out of Malaysia. Okay? And so what did we do? We filled out an STR. And we found out that after they were investigated, the FIU said block that account, they taken that person to court. On another person, they said no, it was just a witch hunt from the other side of the government. But do we really know? So the same process that we took with the government of Malaysia, we have to take with the government of the Bahamas, whether these people are PLPs or F&Ms. And you will find yourself up in the fight that this is what the policy states. But in the absence of the policy, then you have judgment and feeling, and you could end up going to jail. Okay, so that's the importance of the escalation process, and to have it in writing and to make sure you have policy and procedure that the same my friend, love, or family, so they get a little slap on the wrist. Okay, and then you want to make sure that that policy makes sense, because I audited an institution that says in their risk appetite, we have no appetite for PEPs. And they had 4 country accounts, and one was Angola. And you all should know that Angola has all sorts of corruption and problems. So I said, how does your risk appetite say you don't have, and your AML policy doesn't have a control in place for PEPs? They said, because we don't have an appetite for PEPs, we wouldn't open up a PEP account. I said, are you aware that you have 4 PEP accounts on your book? The government of Angola, St. Lucia, how? So you have to make sure that what is written makes sense. Because those people went home. Okay? Because they didn't even know. And especially if you're new, you have to make sure that what you write is what you do. Because when audit comes in, that's what they do. They check what you have written and they examine you against your policy. If your policy old and outdated, you're in trouble. There should be at the bottom of your policy a little date that says this is the renewal date. Or this, you know, and so if your policy as before 2018, you should be advocating this policy needs to be updated. All the laws, all were updated in 2018. So look for that renewal date, or, you know, to make sure it's a current policy, and then make sure it makes sense. Because compliance is everybody's business, and now they say in corporate governance is everybody's business. You know, you can't pass the buck and say it with compliance didn't tell us. No, especially if you're in management. Okay. Any questions or concerns? You're very
I have a
quiet.
question. I have a question in reference to the paper that's due this Friday, Ms. Bullitt. Are we required to reference several local cases, or it just depends on the content of your paper? Is it just one or several, or does it just of the drug trafficking local cases?
Okay, this is what I said, and I have to stop saying this because I given myself away. And if anybody listen to these recordings, all us could be in trouble. More than likely, this is the last time I said this, more than likely, the final exam question is going to be based between Egmont Group and the Bahamas. I did not write this on the question. However, I would recommend that you include and do your research and include Bahamas examples. Does this happen in the Bahamas? Do we have a drug trafficking case that's similar to the corruption that happening in the prison? Many, right? So include it right now so I can make sure that you are on the right track for the exam. Because that's 20%, that's 20 points, and you want to ensure you get as much points.
I understand that. I understand that. I'm just trying to find out if we are required to reference more than one case, or it just depends on the content of your paper. I mean, is one sufficient, or we need to reference more than one case?
There are three different cases, right, that you have to read. I would give an example in the Bahamas for each one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and then that way you could get your grade and put that aside, and you'll be fully prepared for the mandatory question. And when we get to review, you could just pull that out and get a refresher, and you know, you'll be past that stage. You don't need 4 other questions to focus on. So let's get that out the way up front, and then move on to the, like I said, the rest is a little bit more complex, and it's 4 chapters. So we want to ensure that we understand this risk-based approach. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Got it.
Okay.
Awesome, because I had to make some corrections, not corrections, some additions. And I didn't get the recording for last week's, because they really helpful. After I would have gone, after the day, and I go over the chapter again, let's say Monday or Tuesday, and then I re-listen to the recording, it you know, you get a better understanding. I didn't get the recording for last week. Can I get
It's right
that,
on
please?
YouTube.
It on YouTube?
Yeah, if you search the Bahamas Institute of Financial
Okay.
Services, what's the correct name of it?
Yeah, I know, because I got the first one I gone, but they said Miguel had sent an email. I didn't see the email this time. So okay, I'll go and just
Yeah,
research
you
it
can
then.
just
Thank
search it on
you.
YouTube. Right, okay.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and remember, I encourage most persons to do question 1. But if not, then you have question 2, 3, and 4. But again, please do not wait to question 4 to find out that you question 4, you on the wrong track. And now you need to ask questions and the class is finished. You have 10 weeks. Okay? So please, like I say, prepare yourself. If your work gives you time off, schedule that now. Organize your time so that you're not overwhelmed. And I know these weeks are tough. It's very hard to work and go to school and deal with kids when you get home. But please, like I say, speak to your families, ask them for some uninterrupted time. Like I always say, we could have been in Miami with this money. We could have bought a new purse. We could have buy a new game for whatever we like, but we need an investment. So you need some time to go along with it. And I always tell institutions, it's no use you pay for persons to come to school and you don't give them time off to study. That you know, it's a threefold process. You have to speak to home, you have to speak to work, and you have to organize yourself, and you can be successful. But a lot of persons do not do well because they overwhelm, and it's a heavy class and loads of information. So we have to, you know, digest that and then scale it down. What makes sense? What is the meat? What do we need? Miss Bullet is talk so much and give so much information. Would Miss Bullet just stick to the point? I try my best to stick to the point, but I need you to understand and comprehend. Okay? And that's why I go back over and I ask you, give me an example. Tell me what I mean, explain it to me. I want to understand comprehension. I don't want persons to remember. Have a good memory never works. Comprehension. How do I apply this at work? How do I make this make sense? Okay? Other questions or concerns? No? Okay, guys. Have a fabulous week. Enjoy your weekend. And
You
we'll do this
too.
again next week.
Same to you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms.
Okay.
Bullet.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Good night.
Have a good day.
Bye.
All right.